welcome to the channel, mate. Thanks for coming on.
No problem at all. Looking forward to it, mate.
Brilliant. Can you just start off, Carlo? Just if you just tell us what made you want to come on the channel.
Yeah. So 53 years old, lived in Barnsley for 30 and a bit years, and I think mental health is one of them, and I'm sure we'll go about it, that it's so vitally important, but we don't talk about it enough. I think that's number one. I had my own sort of struggles in my early 20s when me and my wife started a family. I was adopted, and that never bothered me. I'll go toe to toe with anyone saying I had the best parents, and besides blood and DNA, I had the best parents anybody could ask for. So being adopted was one of the things I knew. It didn't really mean anything to me because these were my parents and this was me. And it wasn't until we started our own family that it sort of hit something. And I remember going to the doctors and saying, I don't know, I'm just doubting myself. I'm wondering who I am. And the doctor at that time, you're talking mid-90s, said I needed a hobby. So yeah, walked away from that quite disappointed. And then things got just tougher. I found it difficult to get through days. I was constantly questioning myself, where did I come from? My self-worth was really low because I thought, you know, for anybody to have a baby and then say, oh no, I choose my boyfriend rather. My biological one baby basically had a choice. It was me or a boyfriend, so she opted for a boyfriend. And like I say, it's not until somebody puts a newborn baby in your arms that you think, how could you? You know what I mean? So I eventually got some counselling. That worked really, really well. It was really difficult to access at that time, but you know, there were support groups available if I was reliant on drugs, if I was reliant on alcohol, but just having, I suppose, some deeper issues, can we say, it was really hard at that time to find somebody that would have the time to sit and I suppose get to know me, but also try and, you know, make connections. Maybe that comes from there. But eventually we did find it, and that works really, really well. And then I spent a good few years in the Barnsley offending team where I was contracted, and I worked with young victims of crime. The majority of my case was young victims of crime, and it was painful sometimes to see that, you know, when two kids have a fight, as we call it, the impact that can have on someone. And I saw sort of like firsthand that there was lots and lots of resources for people that got in trouble with the law, you know, quite regularly. And there were all sorts of support with case officers and mentors and this and this and this. And I worked with these victims that were afraid to go to school, afraid to leave the house, and that it all went back again to mental health. I left the youth offending team nearly 2 years ago. I now work in a secondary school as a deputy safeguarding lead and a wellbeing officer. So my job most of the time is having one-to-ones with pupils that need a bit of extra support. A lot of them have outside agencies involved, such as camps, compass, eating disorders, bereavement counsellors, and it's just time to sort of check in with them and to get them through a week, sometimes to get them through the day, sometimes just to get them through that next hour type thing when there's a lot of stuff going on in your life. And then, so mental health has been always there, either myself, people I work with, my daughter. I spoke to my daughter earlier, she didn't mind, obviously, not mentioned it, but my daughter struggled intensively with mental health from year 7. And I mean, she was 21 the other day, and so even as an adult now, that's still going on. So I've been there myself. I've been there as a dad, working with people, and the frustrating thing I think is, Matty, that everybody always say, you know, it's okay not to be okay, but that's just a saying. It's all right saying it's okay not to be okay, but if we don't have a you know, a suitcase or a briefcase of resources, of ideas, of support for those people, they're just words on them. That's literally what they are. And I think I talk a lot with parents whose children are having mental health problems and issues, and they're finding it really hard because they come from a generation where mental health it wasn't talked about. My dad never talked about mental health. He had an off day. Tomorrow's another day. And it's difficult. Like I say, I'm 53, mate, and I'm happy I'm the age I am in 2024. I'd hate to think I was 11, 12, 16 with, I wouldn't want, I grew up, my first mobile phone I got in 1999, that was for a job. That was because of my job. And it did me head in when people were ringing me, on a Saturday or on a this, but it was part of the job. Kids nowadays, there is so much pressure on them, and society has completely changed. And I just feel that whatever we can do, we need to do to talk about these things, because it's nobody's fault. I think I can't vote, so I can be as political as I want. I think sometimes I feel resources are forgotten about when it comes to mental health. I speak on a daily basis with parents that are on waiting lists or, frustrated with times and assessments and everything else. So it's years ago when AIDS first did the rounds, we had massive concerts and there were fundraising and cancer came around and that was the next big killer. But we're not like that with mental health, are we? And we're all, anything can happen in any of our lives at any given point. And I fear a little bit, especially for the younger generation, but also for us, of what help's available. And I often say, and I say to a lot of people, I'd rather break my leg than have a problem with mental health, because when I break my leg, I know it might be a 4-hour wait in hospital, right? But it'll get sorted, won't it? When it's mental health, I think there are still huge stigmas around it that you're less than what you really are, and that's why I said when I saw that you did it, I just thought, right, that just needs to be done, doesn't it? We need to talk about this because it's there for everybody, and I think more than people sometimes like to admit, us blokes especially, isn't it? Yeah, we're fine, and the more if you walk on the corridor and the corridor say, "You're all right," but nah, not really. They're not used to that. Because we're programmed to say, yeah, we're fine. And we're telling ourselves we're fine, and we're not always. So I just feel conversations need to be had.
I had a guest on recently, Carlo, who said something similar. She suffered in silence for 8 years because she was frightened of how her friends and family would respond. She didn't want to put on them, is what she sort of said. She felt she didn't want to concern anybody, sort of thing, and she didn't know exactly what it was that she needed from her friends and family at that time either. So we spoke a little bit about where gaps are then, and what would have been useful for you at that time as a response. How would you wanted your family and friends to respond? And she sort of said, well, eventually I did, and I spoke to my wife, and she were really non-judgmental. And she just listened, and I often talk about this a lot, particularly with parents when I'm doing some work with some sort of like systemic work with parents, and I'll say sometimes we don't need to be a fix as such. I think people have got this thing about fixing things, wanting to fix it. Let's fix it. How do we fix it? Sometimes it's just about listening. Let's just listen. Let's just be a good listener. Let's learn how to be good listeners, and then we might start to get somewhere. But there's gaps in there. There's a gap in understanding and knowledge around mental health.
And I think it's hard because if you look at kids, children, they will often say, "Oh, it's my mental health," or "It's my anxiety." And I go back to people I know. We are foster carers as well, and we've had numerous placements. And I remember my wife once saying we had somebody come in, and all the lights needed to be on upstairs when they went to bed. All the lights needed to be on, and I remember my wife sort of saying, there's nothing to be afraid of. And I sort of went afterwards like, there is for her though. We might not see that, but there is for her. And kids, GCSE time, this goes, but I'm really nervous. Oh, you've got nothing to worry about. And basically what you're saying, and this is not a blame sort of thing. What you're saying is how you're feeling is not right. Well, that's why is it not right? A lot of people are not like this. And I am nervous for these exams. I always say to them, I completely get that. I completely get that. And I know some might not be as nervous as you are, and some might be more nervous. But I get that, because a lot seems to be depending on this, doesn't it? You know, it's words can make or break, can't they? And it's like you say, sometimes just listening and acknowledging that's how somebody feels, that can ease the burden a little bit, because a lot of people are walking around with these feelings. And, you know, you're talking about that emotional rucksack that everybody puts on. I get up in the morning and now I'm like a spring butterfly. Me, I'm ready to go at it and go to work. But some people get up and that means that they almost can't get out of bed. So the acknowledgement that thing seems to be really tough for you, it's not always about understanding. It's about acknowledging it must be horrible to feel like that. And I think you create a space, don't you, in which people then maybe can open up a bit more, or at least feel at ease if they want to talk about how they're feeling. And it's
validation.
Sorry?
Validation.
Yeah.
That's exactly what what you're describing there is a validating response to somebody that's struggling. And I think time after time, I see it in my personal life, and not only in my work life. I see invalidation, and then we're in this cycle then, because we've been invalidated by as caregivers and as love, and then we can't make progress then, because we don't feel like we can talk, we don't feel like we can open up, because historically we've had invalidating responses. So that will leave a person thinking, well, what's the point?
Yeah,
I'm gonna continue to get invalidating responses.
It's my dad used to say to me, there was a lot of things I liked, what he didn't like. So if my mum made something, let's say there was sprouts, and said, "Oh, I don't really like sprouts, me," and he went, "Oh, I absolutely love them. I absolutely love them," and my sister did, and my mother did, and my dad always used to say, "But that is life, because your children will sometimes have experience or feelings that you might never have had. That doesn't mean theirs don't count." But what we tend to do as a society is we measure people's well-being by our own standards. Like, I've had a pretty good life, so when somebody comes in and they are worried about money, it's easy to say, "There's no need to worry about money. It'll sort itself out." Again, and I think sometimes, well, I had exams, I wasn't nervous. Well, things might have been different then. You know what I mean? And we respond on how we would feel in the situation that person we're talking to is finding themselves. And that's, I get it, because people want to be helpful, but it can have the opposite effect almost, can't it? Because if every pupil that came in talks to me, and mine is very light touch work, we are not therapists. We can and we will refer to other places and support for parents as well. And it's very light touch. It's about creating a safe space where people can at least say how they're feeling. Because I think another thing is that emotional literacy. Angry means different for me than it does for you, than for my wife, for my dog, or for a student, or for my boss. And this whole sort of your feelings, what you're thinking, because we tend to confuse them a lot as well. So it's there's so much work to be done. And then I'll be honest, because I talked about phones, I was thinking before I came on, I was walking upstairs, and I thought, where would we be as a society if it wasn't for those, and I don't want to say little, as in, but those charitable organisations, such as, for instance, Andy's Man Club, when you talk about adults. How many men during the week would still be struggling if it wasn't for somebody through tragic starting something, and it's sort of catching on really quickly because it's so useful. And it's finding those sort of resources, isn't it, that can obviously often make this huge impression on people. Because when it's non-judgmental, well, the best people to be non-judgmental is people that might be feeling similar to what you were doing, and that's huge, isn't it? So yeah, lot still needs to be done, doesn't it?
Agree totally. I think that there's gaps, and I think it's a shame that, well, I don't know if it's a shame. I think it's inspirational that there are organisations and individuals that want to try and plug them gaps. But I think we touched on it earlier, and I'd like to come back to this actually and dig a little bit deeper politically, sort of thing, from kind of like a legislative aspect. Where are them gaps, and where is that money better spent? Because I'm into politics as well. My friends will sort of tell you that I bore them senseless with politics. So I'd be really interested to come back to that at some point, Carlo, if we can. But what I wanted to do, because there's a couple of things that I really want to I wanted to ask you about. I wanted to ask you about your your journey, your difficulties, if that's the right way to put it.
Yeah.
And there was something that come to mind when you mentioned that you've been adopted. But I got the sense that you didn't know much about your adoption, and so then you got to a point where your sort of self-awareness or self-actualization maybe felt like that was something that we wanted to improve. Yeah. So I just wondered if you wanted to just share a little bit more about your, how you improved or made improvements in relation to that.
Yeah. So always knew I was adopted. From when you're teeny tiny asking where babies come from, I was always told they grow in mummy's belly, but I was special, special in a good way. And somebody else had brought me into this world for my mum and dad to look after. It was it's difficult to translate because obviously it wasn't Dutch, but it was a really warm way of saying, somebody brought you into this world for us to treasure and to nurture and to love. And it was never, ever anything I thought about because I was here. I lived in a, I had a really good upbringing. My mum and dad both worked. I did pretty well at school, and I was happy with who I was. There were my sister was completely opposite. Always wanted to know, and at a much earlier age than me, sort of went into like finding, her mum and everything. I had no need. And I think looking back as you're older, part of that was I didn't want to upset my mum and dad. Why would I possibly wanted to find out more about the people that ultimately decided it was better not to have me or not to care for me? So it was never, we were always very open about it. And often if my sister said, have you ever thought, I've talked about it, but no need, no desire. I feel in such a good, I was always in such a good place. I was always afraid, like, what will I learn? And is that going to have an effect? And if that's going to have an effect, I'd rather not know, because the balance of life was just absolutely perfect for me. And like I said, I had a 6 or 7 month contract after finishing college in Holland in Yugoslavia, which was then a country. Worked in a in a big hotel as a sports entertainer and rep. A family from Barnsley comes on holiday. I start talking to Jeanette, who's now my wife, and you fast forward, and in 93 we have our first child. I came over. I was working here. We had our first child, and then suddenly, for the first time in my life, people asked me questions that I couldn't answer. So when a baby's born, they ask about, is there any heart disease in the family? Is there this? Is there this? Is there this? And I kept going, I don't know. I remember, being in contact with my mum and dad and asking, says, we don't know. We don't know. We just, we have a name, who your mum was. We know the circumstances, but no. Right. And I never really thought anything about it, thinking, it's not really. And then this little baby is born, and you think, wow, because it changes you. Suddenly, I am responsible for this little tiny human being, and the next 18, 25, 35 years of my life, everything I'm going to do is going to be for the benefit of those people. And when my mates are going out, but my daughter is ill, I'm going to choose my daughter because she's more important than they are. And she was about 3 or 4, and she'd been unwell for a little bit, nothing major. And the doctors kept asking, and I kept saying, I don't know. And I thought, maybe I should. And maybe I should just be prepared for whatever I get to hear, good, bad, whatever. So I spoke to, via telephone, of course, spoke to my mum and dad. I said, listen, they keep asking these questions. I think I need to know a little bit more. And my mum and dad said, that's not an issue if that's what you want. And in Holland, there's an organisation that deals with adoptions and stuff. And my mum says, we can give them a ring, explain that you live over there, and see what we do. Anyway, they phoned, and I got questionnaires, Matty. I got questionnaires in the post that I had to fill in how I felt about it. And then they rang me one day and said, you cannot have a meeting with your biological mother if she wants that without prior counselling. You need counselling before that. Okay. I said, can I have that counselling here because I live here? That wasn't possible. So I went to Holland, a couple of trips. I had the counselling, and eventually I met my mum, and it meant nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was somebody who clearly I was apparently related to. I also realized how difficult that was for her. I was made aware that I was born in 71. In 73, she had another child, and she had a couple more children after, and she was now married to the father of that child that was born after me. I was from what she called a previous life. And her partner at that time had said, it's that baby or it's me. You can't have both of your life. And she made the choice that she wanted that security. Didn't think she could look after a baby. So and medically, she didn't know anything because it was a boyfriend at the time. So I'd gone through all these hoops and done everything to prepare myself to then get almost half an answer. Her saying, "No, my side is absolutely healthy, but I don't know anything about your sort of like that side." So
emotional. Sorry, Carlo. From an emotional aspect. What were your feelings towards your biological mum in that moment, and then now?
That's really strange because I walked in, just wanted an answer to one question, and then actually, because I was with like a psychologist and somebody from the agency that dealt with it to make sure everybody was okay, and they said, it's really hard for your biological mum as well to come here because of circumstances we can't tell you. So I think the question you want to ask is valid, but let's do a little bit of, maybe you want to talk a little bit about yourself, what you do, your job, the fact that you've got a child. And that was a really nice introduction because it put us at ease. And when I started talking, and I felt really proud because I was this Dutchman from a town nobody's ever heard of, and I lived abroad because it is. And I thought I'd done all right. We started a little family. I was working. I built up a bit of a friend circle. So all the things that was, what people tell you is really difficult, moving abroad, but I sort of done, and I felt quite accomplished with myself. And as soon as I started talking, she started crying. And my whole tone and being just changed to like empathy for her almost. I felt really, really sorry that I dragged her through all this. Like I'd made it, because she said there couldn't be any further contact because her sons and her now husband are unaware that I exist and that I was ever born, and that's how she wanted to keep it. And again, isn't it? If I'd have been, somebody who'd been through the system as either a foster child or in institutions, I could have been really mad, but I was okay with that because I was all right. And I felt really incredibly sorry for her. And it wasn't until afterwards that I had to digest, right, this is all right, and I feel sorry, but actually the information I needed to know, I've only got half of it. So I didn't feel negative towards it. But I think if I had a choice now, I would say, if I could do it all again, I would not necessarily go through with that meeting, because I did feel that my feelings of how I felt was almost like not valid. I should have maybe felt a little bit more empathy, sympathy, some sort of feelings, because it's always, how could somebody leave a baby? How could somebody do this? But again, isn't it? We're measuring it with our standards. Her situation at that point was completely different. So, and I'll be honest, the biggest supporters besides my wife were my mum and dad. They waited for me outside. my dad said, we're not going home. We're going to sit somewhere where it's nice and quiet, and you can talk as much or as little as you want. You can cry as much or as little as you want. We can laugh as much or as little as you want. You let us know what you feel comfortable with, because you've gone through quite a bit in sort of like an hour's meeting. And I just said, I'm all right, actually. I feel really sorry for her. I haven't got the answers I wanted, but that don't matter. I just hope she's all right. And there was no emotional connection. I never saw this woman as, wow, because I think those sort of feelings come from the people that pick you up when you've grazed your knee, and that change your nappy when, you know, your tummy's hurting. They were the ones that waited outside the gates after my first day at nursery or junior school, or, you know, those sort of feelings and connections come from the people that care for you, not necessarily for the person that gave birth to you, because whilst that's a very difficult biological process, feelings wise, as a newborn baby, I don't think, you know what I mean? So my feelings, and up till now, the only time I think about it, which I think a lot of people that are up to do, is on my birthday. And I think I'm a year older, you know, I'm 53, so she'll be, what, 73 now. And you sort of think, I'd never want to know what she's doing or whatever. All I sometimes think to myself is, if she's as happy as you've been, you know, in places, then she made the right choice, didn't she? I made two people incredibly happy, and my mum and dad always said that kids bring the best out of you. So my dad always says, you know, it's not you thanking us for being parents, we thank you for coming into our lives, type thing. And so it's something that's with you. And yeah, round at my birthday, you sometimes think about it. If anything, I thank my mum and dad, because I've been adopted. We had lots of discussions around how we were feeling, how things made us feel, like knowing that my dad was my dad, knowing that my mum was my mum. And in a weird sort of way, maybe because of that, I've always felt quite easy having discussions with people about how they're feeling, because I think it was so much promoted from like a young child for me. So it's in a way, it's been a huge positive in my life, because I think it's opened doors to conversations that maybe other people won't have with their children, because it's a difficult one to have, isn't it? So yeah, it's part of me, isn't it? So besides being a Barnsley fan and, you know, working in a school and driving a Renault, oh yeah, I'm adopted as well, but that's all part of this, you know.
A question for you. One of my favourite quotes is, it's advantageous for us to know where we've been, to know who we are. What do you think? What do you think? Because you've got a lived experience of this. Literally, I'm talking to somebody that knows if there's value to that quote. Because like I say, I really like it and I use it a lot at work. What are your thoughts?
I'm a firm believer that whatever we feel comes from somewhere. So this is going to sound extremely stupid, and some of my mates have laughed, and that's fine, because they don't feel it. The one place where I feel probably most, I can't say at ease, but quite tranquil, is a hospital. And that sounds really silly. But I was born in a hospital. I remained in that hospital under the care of nurses for the first 3 to 4 weeks of my life. And I was then transferred to, I can only call it like a nunnery. I was with nuns till about, I was between 11 and 14 months old when my mum and dad adopted me, and that became final like a few years later. So I always think those first few weeks in hospital, where people put you close, where there is contact, and I'm not saying that as a newborn baby I took all the surroundings in, but I think there is something that I just, if I have a hospital appointment when we have family that have been really, really ill, and it's not that I'm not emotional, but there is something about hospitals, doctors, that I don't know. My biological mum was a nurse when she had me, so maybe that, I don't know. So I do think that sometimes you think, I wonder where that comes from, and I've always said, and maybe it's not, but I think once I got the full picture of how my, the journey of Carlo up to being adopted, what that looked like, I think that was probably the most valuable and interesting information when they said, you were born at this time, your mum cuddled you for the last time at that time. You were then taken to a room where nurses would come and they would feed you and they would this, and then somebody would come and they would come and play with you. At that point, there were charities and there were people that came to sort of play or rock me, because obviously nurses couldn't always do it because they were waiting for a place somewhere where I could go. Foster care was very different then. It was more about adoption. So I get it. I think knowing those first few days, weeks, months of my life, what that looked like and who did what, has made me understand maybe why I feel about certain things like I do. Because if I talking to any medical professional or having appointments, I've had some difficult operations, I've always felt really at ease. And maybe that's the surroundings, maybe it's not. But no, I do think there is something about that. And we see it with some of our foster children as well. Certain behaviours, certain needs have clearly got, almost directly relatable to parents and their problems and issues in their life, which means they can't look after these children. And when kids sometimes think, they see the difference, like whether that be going from 0 to 100 anger-wise, risky behaviours. I think, I do believe that we are a piece of clay that's really soft when we're born. Over time, that hardens up, but especially in those first, and it don't have to be the first few months, but in the first 8, 9, 10 years of your life, everything makes an impression and stays somewhere. I think every handshake, every cuddle, every kiss, every telling off, it stays somewhere, and it has a place, doesn't it? And I think sometimes later on, the reaction to those events, especially if they're really, for some of the children we've looked after, that's been really, really traumatic. Yeah, I think so. Knowing where you come from, it's a little bit like a guide, isn't it? There is still a map, but it gives you a bit of a guide of where that might have come from. Definitely.
I did some training recently. It was really, really good actually, and we had a child psychiatrist that delivered part of that training, and what he said was he basically said that there's lots of different factors that contribute to well, this conversation was actually in relation to neurodivergence, but what he spoke about was antenatal, postnatal, then so you've got your genetic factors that make a person. Then you've got your environmental factors, so poverty and so on. Living in an area that might be, there might be particular issues in that particular area, like I'm trying to think an environmental factor, like poor access to things and poor access to facilities and things like that. So there are lots of different factors, and it were really interesting, fascinating how he explained it and how that contributes to it. But I linked that. I linked that away from that training. I thought about there were a quote that I've used before, and I can't remember where I picked it up from, but it was that there can be genetical predisposition to things, but the trigger tends to be environmental factors later on in life.
100%.
Yeah.
I think when people say blood is thicker than water, I go, no, it's not. Because for me, my not even, well, I suppose one of the most traumatic events I've had is, my dad passed away about 6 years ago, and even that was really peaceful, and we were all there and everything else. And the biggest compliment, it's a friend that I've got that came to see me, who lives in Amsterdam, and she says the biggest compliment I can give you is like you were just like your dad, because again genetically there was nothing. But the way I am has been, there are certain things that are, that are in my DNA, that are in my blood, and that there could be. but only who I am, my sense of humor, how I deal with people, that's come from those examples around me in early childhood and all through my life. So, yeah, I agree. I think, you know, diseases, for instance, you might carry a gene that can cause, which we can't deny, but that's something biological. That's a reaction that happens inside, and this happens. But actually, caring for people, loving people, nurturing people, whether it's children, adults, or whatever, that has a far bigger, because I do think we are those, like I say, little bits of clay. And I think every event in your life just adds that other layer. And it's a bit like a 3D printer, isn't it? It goes up and up and up and up, and then you're an adult, and that's what that's who we are. And again, I've said before, linking back to what you said earlier, you know, as parents, we parent often as we've been parented, haven't we? And I've said before to my wife, to our social worker, because when they come for our foster children, access to genetic, you know, I'm always looking for courses. I'm always looking for something, because as life changes, society changes, the world changes, does our way of parenting need to maybe change a little as well, and take some of these things into account? My dad never had to talk to me about the pressures of social media, people sending me messages I didn't want to see. But I've had to deal with that with my children. So it has to come from somewhere, doesn't it? And it's a little bit like sometimes, and I don't want to get too political, like the curriculum, isn't it? It never seems to change. No matter what happens in the world, we're still studying this. I'd love, and it won't happen, not in my lifetime, or my children's or my grandchildren's lifetime, in a utopia, I dare think that talking about mental health and mental well-being and doing well-being exercises, you know, if we could have that for every child in school, an hour a week, like we do RE or PHSE, I think we're getting somewhere then, aren't we? Because
that's a fabulous idea.
It's mega important. You know, we deliver some group work in our school every month, a different subject, and a couple of weeks ago it's just about well-being, and it's not death by PowerPoint. It's very much conversation. Most of them were year 7s and 8s, because there's a lot of anxiety about that change from junior school to senior school. And for the last 20 minutes, we rolled yoga mats out, and we were all laid in a room with the doors, with the windows, blinds down, and we did. You were aware of it. We put on YouTube just a body scan, and it was just about breathing and feel. And the feedback from that, I suppose when you walk past, you see things, but actually the pupils that took part in that were just like, wow. And I think that's what we need to maybe push for, can we say? Because I think a lot of things we depend on services like camps and like Compass and like Andy's Man Club. But I think as parents and as grown-ups, there's a lot that we still need to learn as well, that we need to know. When we talk to parents about different things, I didn't know that was there, you know. And I think we go back to how I started. That's why this is so important, isn't it? To say, actually, me, warts and all, but this is it. And this is a product of this that's happened, you know, that's happened. You know, the wrinkles is following Barnsley for 30 odd years. There's little bits of everything that make me, I suppose. That's what
Ditto with wrinkles for following Blooming Barnsley. It's for his sins, isn't it? I'm going to come back to that, because you've just sort of I'm going to finish on sort of like professional, that professional arena and professional experiences, because I think that's really, there's a lot of value there. But I was just going to ask you before we get to that. You mentioned that you'd have some counselling, and I just wanted to get your insight as to what your experience of counselling were like.
I'll be honest. I was a young adult at that time. And the lady that did it, when she said what we were going to do, she said, all I want to do is, I want to have some sessions with you, and I just want to talk to you, and I want to get to know you, because it's very hard for any professional to come up with a solution or an idea of what's going on without really getting to know somebody. And it was her analogy of, the first 3-4 weeks is a little bit like an X-ray for a broken arm. It's looking at what can we see? And she was really non-judgmental, 100%. But I think just so never shocked, never questioned anything. And I think sometimes when people say about counselling, they feel like it's like I can't say a telling off, but they feel like they won't be believed or whatever. And I think, again, your own experience forms your opinion. So when I say to people, have you tried counselling? It's because my experience with counselling was absolutely amazing. So I think but again, this is mid-90s. I fast forward to 4 or 5 years ago, and going to counselling with my daughter. It just seems different because the demand has, and you'll know more than me, but it feels like more than trebled, quadrupled. The resources put into these resources probably not even gone up with inflation. So the time span, I remember my counselling sessions as being an hour long. And they were really good. She also said, where would you like this counselling? Because you could go to the doctor's surgery. We opted for a quiet room in a library because to me, it felt a little bit more like personal rather than. So again, I remember sessions where it feels like she never said anything. She asked me one question and I just a bit like this. And I thought, wow. And because what often you do, you start talking and then you start making connections yourself, like, oh, I wonder if this is anything to do with that. So my experience was genuinely 10 out of 10. And like I say, I've sat in with some sessions with my daughter, which I felt, and I've never said that to her because she don't need to know, but at that time I felt a little bit like, oh, there's nothing worse than when somebody's in crisis and you have an appointment and they say, right, okay, so what we'll do, we'll see you again next month. And you think, oh my God, that's like 4 weeks and a bit. And in the last month, we've had, lots and lots of crises to points where, we've had to call the police because my daughter has been, wanting to end her life, taking an overdose, self-harm, blah, 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 blah. So I am a firm believer in it. I know every school in Barnsley, Sheffield, South Yorkshire, England will look at mental health and stuff different way. I think I'm incredibly lucky to have a boss that's a trauma-informed specialist almost, and a nurse of 20 odd years. So we don't have a room where people go and play cards or play Monopoly. If there's an issue that a pastoral, or a need, should I say, that a pastoral person, member of staff can't resolve, they can refer to us. And we do regular check-ins. And I've had children that have been really at crisis with CAMHS and other that I see 3 times a week for an hour. And sometimes we go for a walk on the car park. Sometimes I sit in silence and they just draw and talk to me about their day because I am not equipped, because I'm not a counsellor, I'm not aim to get them through this day or this half day to try and keep, because we know there's not many pupils that come to school, Matty, on the morning, jumping when the gate's up. So I can't wait to go in there for double science today and double maths. But there is a full cohort of students where school is actually a really safe place. And, last year I did this on my own. This year there's a team of 3 of us, and different students need different things. So if a student has some issues with, let's say, food intake or eating, and, we get them a quiet room where they can eat the lunch without other people having to see it. When somebody needs a bit of a movement break or things are getting too much and they want to have a walk outside, then we'll go and walk over the car park. And I've always said, and I say to parents, and I got this from one of my previous jobs, I get more time with some of the students I work with when I'm walking because they don't have to look at me. When you sit across from somebody and tell me how you feel, or what can I do, or how's it? First question's always when they walk in, what lessons have you had today? Because that's an easy one to answer because they know they'll have either math, science, or dance or whatever. When you walk in, you're next to each other. People don't have to look, do they? Because some are still a little bit afraid or hesitant to say, I'm having a proper shit day, or my anxiety.
It's that informal.
Yeah.
it's that informal approach, and you're right. You're definitely right. I notice that I have patients that would rather sit to my side rather than in front of me, because that formality sometimes is so unbearable for particularly young people. You don't. It's difficult then for them to engage. So there's definitely a lot of value in that, and trying to take that formality out in it a little bit.
I think for kids, if you want to get something out of them, then you can't do anything that feels abnormal to them. We as adults have discussed, I don't know how hard it is to talk about our feelings, but we'll expect a 13-year-old to tell us why they're crying. Well, life's not like that. So I probably learned most in one of my previous jobs, where I was a mentor for prolific young offenders. And lots of people used to paint these as like troublesome kids. No, they're kids that had loads of troubles. And the one way of almost getting through, or feeling to a point where you could help them, was just putting the dog in the car, going around Look Park or Wasbury Res, or Silkstone with the dog, going for a walk. Because a 15-year-old with a 47-year-old during the day when they should be at school or whatever is a bit weird. But actually, when you've got a dog, it just, you know what I mean? It just makes it normal to say, actually, it's absolutely fine. And if they don't want to talk, that's fine as well, of course. Don't get me wrong, because we can't make people talk. So the only thing we can do is try and create a space that feels safe to talk. And if you can cross that one off, you've done what you can. And if somebody doesn't want to talk, that doesn't mean we failed. It might mean that we need to look at it a different way, to try it again, because we must never give up. Because, and I know I've said it a few times, but I am hugely passionate about the young people of today, because I do feel they have it a lot harder than maybe what we did. And it's about, when I say understanding, it's about looking at everything in their lives through their eyes and not through our lived experiences.
I wanted to ask you, from a professional, your professional opinion on themes, sort of themes in relation to what do you see, from a mental health perspective, obviously. Where are the themes? What's going on in sort of schools, and where are gaps, and what are young people presenting with?
I think there's a lot of anxieties about self-acceptance, about the way you look, the music you like, the clothes you wear when you're not in school. I think there is a huge need about learning how to communicate, and it's not a fault, because it's how society have gone. Children have communication is a lot easier nowadays, because you can tell somebody you don't like them because you send a WhatsApp. But they've never been trained what that conversation looks like when you're face to face, because everything is behind that little thing, isn't it? So emotional literacy almost of themes. Yeah, I think self-acceptance, being different, friendships, because I think social media, and listen, I can't say I love social media. WhatsApp, I like WhatsApp. Because when I first came to England, I sent a letter to my mum and dad to say that my wife was pregnant. And it took 10 days to arrive, and then I got a letter back. So 20 days later, I got the reaction. When my grandson was born 2 years ago, I sent a photo, and instantly my mom, who was 300 or 400 or 500 miles that way, and my sister got the news. So I think social media has its place. It's how we use it. I dare say there are, and not many, but I think there is definitely some where mobile phone use and having that thing in your hand almost becomes like addictive. I've known some children to have huge emotional, mental and physical meltdowns when the phone was taken off them by a parent. And I think for some, I think a lot of work should or needs to be done with year 6, year 7. It's that sort of change, because they suddenly, year 6, to mentally prepare them for what big school looks like, and how, I don't know if it's still a thing, but loads of kids seem to get a phone because they're going to big school. I mean, mum and dad still drop them off and wait outside, but they feel the need, they need to have a phone. And I think loads of them buy them, and they'll see what the best phone is out there. Say, we're going to get them one of them for Christmas or for the birthday or for whatever. And then they start school and they get this phone. And that's when it stops, isn't it? How many do actually have the conversation about healthy use of the phone? Like, you know, take people's numbers and, you know, you might want to do this or you know, send a video of what you're doing. And it's all the negative side effects. It's the cyber bullying, it's the communications, and this will not be just where I work, it'll be, you know, there is always bouts of people sending inappropriate pictures because it's my boyfriend, isn't it? So that's what he wants to see, so that's what I'm going to do. And the danger sort of like attached to that. So yeah, I think a lot of them, when you talk about themes, is about people thinking they are, and these are words they use, weird, abnormal, because they like different music. They, you know, don't follow that particular artist on this particular platform, and it very soon becomes, you know, it becomes a reason almost to attack people. I saw you listening to this, or somebody tells me you did that, and we're not talking no more, are we? If I didn't like, I had a mate, no, not a mate, there was a lad in my class. I didn't like him. He didn't like me. That was no issue, because when I went to play art, I went that way and he went that way, and that's how we dealt with it. And we didn't have to be in each other's lives. We were in the same class, but we didn't have to be in each other's lives. But now we feel the need to have, you know, 300 friends on Snapchat. We only know 6 of them, but if you only have 200, you're less of a person than the person in that other form who's got. So I think that's and this is some of the work that we you know, you try and do. And people not dealing, and this is the first question you asked, but people not dealing with feeling different or not feeling like other people are feeling. People be fearful of going to a lesson, people being fearful of saying, I don't feel myself, because everything is this, isn't it? And that don't always give you the answer. So yeah, and then you have the thematic things that come around every day. So we've just had a bout of, you know, mock exams have just finished. There's another lot in March where people, you know, put real pressure on themselves, and sometimes it is literally about just saying, I see you doing the best you can do. That's all we ask. I know, and this is always the hard thing when you work in school, because they are surrounded by teaching staff, some fantastic teaching staff that want to get the best out of them. And sometimes to get the best out of them, you know, your expectations have to be really high, don't they? Because they do. That's when you get the best out of somebody. But for some, that doesn't always work, and you need to turn it around almost. So when it goes around saying, there's only 20 weeks till the GCSEs, my language is always, we've got 20 weeks until we start. Like, it's the same message, isn't it? So, yeah. And, you know, we could have another 4 hours talking about how education doesn't always fit every single person. And it'd be great if you had 5 teachers, because it's, you said Barnsley earlier, don't you? You know, I've often said a good head coach can give somebody a bit of a telling off to get the best out of him, but the other lad needs an arm around his shoulder as you walk back to the changing room. And the other one has more of an impact if you start throwing water bottles around to show how unhappy you are with somebody's performance. And I think in school it's the same. Some kids need this, some kids need that. In primary schools, you are sat in the same room with the same teachers all day. It's a lot about nurture and play. And it's a huge step to then suddenly go to a very academic environment where pressures have been put, homework is being set to get you to a place that when you leave, you are the best that you could possibly be. That's a difficult job. And I think that's where some of the, you know, the ones that are struggling a bit, that's where it comes from.
I had this conversation quite a lot recently, particularly recently. I think I don't want to be too specific, maybe about my concerns, because it might get me in hot water. But what I have said is that I think more so nowadays, I feel that certain education settings have lost that element of individualization. So that there seems to be like a need for everybody to just conform, and people that are slightly are maybe asked to leave lessons, asked to leave the environment, and I think that it's a real shame, because we know what happens when there's exclusions, permanent exclusion, etc. we know where that leads to, unfortunately.
100%. And school is so important, because I think a lot of the times when I look at the work, especially my boss is doing, so whilst I'm safeguarding and well-being, safeguarding the most troublesome case I've dealt with my boss, but you often see, when you see certain behaviours, certain needs coming through, that can, you know, alarm bells start ringing a little bit. And the only way you see those behaviours is by I suppose getting the best out of that person and making that person feel at ease. So, you know, I get it. You know, a teacher in front of 30 kids, I couldn't do it. I couldn't. No. But it's also the way I know my colleagues have pupils they work with. And sometimes all they do, we've got it's called the nurture room. We have 2 rabbits in there. And sometimes just sitting, stroking, you know, a rabbit, and combing, and maybe feeding, maybe cleaning the cage, but doing something. That's when they're able to talk about how they're feeling. I have quite a few. Most of mine are year 11 and drawing, art. You know, the whiteboard often get, you know, pictures or whatever. And it's finding what works for people to feel relaxed, and to say, you know, this is what's bothering me. And I also have to say that compared to when I was younger, when you were younger, you know, if you put the news on, it's there's not much positive stuff, is there? It's talk about a potential, you know, there's the war in the Ukraine, and now we're talking about Russia happening this, and then global warming is happening, and the economy is on its knees. And this is the climate our children are going to school in, and we tell you must achieve, you must achieve. But actually, when you look out the window, all you see is negativity and dark times and difficult times. And that's quite difficult as well, isn't it? Because I was brought up in a time where we brought immigrants over from Turkey and Morocco to fill the labour market, because there was so much to do and so little people to do it. And now we're in, you know, in a little bit, it's got a bit less again now, but after the summer holidays, there was also a bit of an environment where we were quite negative about certain aspects of our own society. And it's difficult, isn't it? Because as adults, we can see where that comes from, and we say, but this, at least. But as a 12 or 13-year-old, it just feels a very negative sort of, you know, place, society that we are going into, because it's a little bit like a springboard, isn't it? You walk up the steps in nursery, you walk along the springboard in junior school, and then as you get to the end, you go up and down a few times. That's year 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then once you make that dive, your future starts, doesn't it? You pull 16. And you know that pool is filled with wars and famine and you know global warming, and then maybe another recession and an unstable economy, and everything is always really, really, really negative. And I'm sure, and I'm not saying all the kids watch the 10 o'clock news on a Monday to Friday, but you hear a lot. You hear parents talk, and they are worried, and the winter's coming, and you know the benefits seem to be going down and down a lot. And that's the environment these children go to school in. So we need to keep an eye on these, because it's like you say. And I know a lot of people talk about behaviours, and that's what they are, but it's a need, isn't it? It's a symptom of something. When somebody's constantly running off or throwing or shouting, it's a symptom of something. And it's always been, and this is what I don't like to do things to children, for children. If you do it with them, and if you get the buy-in, that's when you then have a bit of a chance to say, actually, you know, if they own it with you, whatever it is you win, you get a chance of getting even small but some little successes.
We're going to run out of time. I'm gutted, because I could talk to you all day. That was fascinating, genuinely brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
No, always happy, and we need to do it, don't we? So you know, everybody will have their own experiences, whether it's professional, personal, or whatever. And the more we do it, Matty, we increase the chance of getting things changed and better for all of us. And I suppose that's ultimately what we want, isn't it?
Hope so. That's the idea. So yeah, hopefully we even if it's just a small difference, any difference will do for me.
100%. If the room is dark, it's very hard to go from complete dark to complete sunlight. But you know, a little square inch of sunlight is better than having none at all, is it? So I suppose that's how we have to look at it. Every little bit, every help, every little bit matters. It counts.
Thank you for coming on and contributing. It was really genuinely brilliant. I wish you all the best and keep in touch.
We definitely will. Cheers.
Ta-ra, mate.
All right, cheers, pal. Let me know when it's out, and I'll share it and everything, and I'll put it through our Reds Report Twitter as well, because obviously we've got the podcast with quite a few in there, so it'll, you know, get your followers up.
Really appreciate that.
All right, pal.
Thank you very much. Top man. Cheers, mate.
Shout. All right.
I want to say a massive thank you to Carlo for coming on the channel. What a fascinating guy. Really, really good interview. I really enjoyed that. It was terrific. And I'm looking forward to keeping in touch and seeing how things are getting on. So don't forget, please like and subscribe. If you want to come on, if you want to get in touch with me, let me know and we can get something penciled in. Get these videos shared with your friends and family. Anybody that you think might be struggling or might get something from these videos, or like I said, if you think there's somebody that you know that might want to come on and have a discussion about things, please get in touch with me. Let me know. We will see you again. I'm just thinking this was episode 3, so this will be released in January. So I'll be seeing you in February with another guest in February. Take care, and I'll see you soon.